Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar brought to you by Traverse Systems. Improve supply chain visibility, or how to improve supply chain visibility to reduce inventory out of stocks. My name is Jason Stegent. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started so everybody can make the best use of their time today. All in will be about 45 minutes from start to finish. We will have a live Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, you'll see the Q&A box is open. Just type in your questions, click submit. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. The environment you're in, there's no dial-in option for attendees. You're going to be hearing it through your PC speakers or through your mobile device. So make sure that the audio on your PC or mobile device is turned up to get optimal sound quality. A few other things about the environment that you're in, you can really personalize your experience. So all the windows have min-max options. If you want to view the slides, view the video in full screen mode, you can do that. If you look along the bottom of your screen, you'll see some icons that enable you to do a few different things. You can share it socially. If you have any questions for support, you can do that as well. Participate in chat. There's a resource button. It's the one that has the paperclip icon on it. Within that, Traverse is hosting a few pieces of content. They're hosting a downloadable item. They're hosting a link to a recent highlight reel from a recent webinar. So feel free to click on that and download that content. So we really want to make this multi-touch so you can get as much value out of today's session as possible. Finally, we're recording it. If you missed us, don't worry about it. You'll have access to the on-demand version within the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for an email from us on how to get access to that. I want to briefly introduce today's presenters. We've got a great lineup, starting with Jay Kent of SLB Performance, former Chief Supply Chain Officer for some of the leading brands across the globe. He's one of our highlights for today. We've got Greg Holder, co-founder and CEO at Traverse Systems, Richard Willjam, who's a Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Traverse Systems, and then finally Kip Kapelke, a sales engineer with Traverse. These guys are going to do a heck of a job, and we're really excited to have them here. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Richard. Richard, great to have you with us today. So if you could, tell us, what are you and the Traverse team seeing in the marketplace today?
Thank you, Jason. And on behalf of the entire Traverse Systems team, I'd like to thank our audience today for joining us. Jason, what we're seeing is all over the place. A combination of too little inventory and too much inventory. There was a recent study done by the IHL Group, and what they concluded was that the combination of the two led to $340 billion in lost sales in 2022 alone. I think what was the startling statistic of that study was, of that $340 billion, $129 billion of it was a direct result of supplier issues. Now, I think there's a perception in the industry that there's just too much stock out there, but I think the truth is a little different than that. In two studies, one also the IHL Group, they indicated that when consumers went to the store for 5 items, they only came home with 4. And in another study done by Retail Insight, consumers said that 70% of them believe out of stocks are a bigger problem today than it was at the onset of the pandemic. Those are 2 bad issues for retailers today. Number one, the obvious, lost sales, correct? But the second is more long-term, and that's damage to the brand, which is extremely problematic for any retailer, whether they be brick and mortar or online, because that's your reputation. And in such an environment where competition is so fierce, it again is very problematic. So, Jason, just a kind of a quick summary, that's what we're seeing today.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate that. We're going to bring in Jay Kent now. Jay, if you could, tell me a little bit about your background and your take on what your peers are up against today and really these uncharted waters.
Thanks, Jason, Greg, Richard, and Kip. Glad to be here. My background is really a practitioner. As a former Chief Supply Chain Officer and headed up manufacturing for GNC, as well as Chief Supply Chain Officer for a number of other companies, Pet Value, Pet Supermarket, Tiger Direct, held SVP roles at Kohl's department stores. Actually was there 3 times when they were small, medium, and large. Also have worked at Linens and Things, Toys R Us, and Macy's. And what really happens now after leaving industry about 6 years ago, I started a business advisory group. And what we do is we help companies in 3 aspects. The biggest thing is reduce your transportation spend, improve the visibility from a business intelligence standpoint. Second thing is we help companies reduce expense as it relates to ocean. Not surprising to me, but for many, Maersk CEO recently mentioned that 12% of their invoices actually had errors associated with them. And then last, and probably the most applicable for today's session, is I help companies improve sales by implementing different supply chain improvements.
Thanks, Jay. So, as you look at your peers, what are they up against today in these really uncharted waters?
Great question. I would tell you that today, the chief supply chain officers are really facing a number of different things. The pandemic really just moved forward the industry about 5 years. So now things need to be more decisive, quicker. There's obviously more challenges as it relates to labor. It's forcing people to put in more automation and more technology than they thought they were. And obviously, issue that faces everyone is inventory. It's a huge challenge that everyone's facing, not having the right inventory at the right time.
So to piggyback off that, Jay, as a former chief supply chain officer, which is worse, too much stock or not enough?
That's an easy one. Not having enough merchandise is worse. You can't sell what you don't have available. If your company and brand isn't laser focused on looking at your inbound supply chain and managing the vendor performance, you're at a disadvantage. Most studies right now are showing that people walk away. Richard just showed a slide a couple minutes ago that showed the same thing that I've seen and heard from many of my peer group, that if you don't have the product, customers are just simply walking away.
So what would your advice be to your former peers to avoid those out of stocks?
I would say that the majority of my background has really been focused around turnaround and growth companies. And one of my go-to things that I always bring to each new company is 3 things. One is to look and understand what's happening within the company as it relates to inbound visibility. If a company is not measuring inbound visibility, it's a huge disadvantage. Too often people focus on the outbound, and everyone wants to measure outbound performance, but that's a huge challenge. Most of the challenge is really on the inbound. If your in stock is not at 97% or higher on your key products, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And so although a lot of companies and a lot of boards and executive committees want to talk about on-time delivery performance, they want to talk about 99.9% fill rate. If you're not fulfilling your inbound need at 97%, you're always going to be at a disadvantage, and you're going to continue to lose customers.
Great insight. Thanks, Jay. I want to bring in Greg Holder now. Greg, so, as the co-founder of Traverse, you've got some unique insight into this. So how can real-time, to piggyback off of what Jay said, how can real-time inbound visibility help companies manage events like new store openings, ad events, and disruptions?
Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you for the question, and thank everybody that's in attendance. My background is engineering from an education standpoint, but I spent many years as a practitioner in supply chain operations, and for the last 20 with Traverse Systems as co-founder and most recently CEO. And what we've learned in the last 30 years, and particularly the rest of the world has learned in the last 2 years, is the supply chain is messy. For years, we've talked about the perfect order index, and it starts with that perfect order. And at the end of the day, if the order that was created is actually a perfect order, that's the last time that order will ever be perfect. And the reason is there's just so much that can happen from the point that order gets created until the point that it's consumed, whether consumption is in a distribution center or consumption is in a store. And so with inbound visibility, you're looking at trying to find out what are the data elements that I need to gain some insight in so that I don't fail a mission, whether it's a new store that you mentioned or whether it's a promo or an ad. Things that you look for are not just that purchase order, but routing requests, and you take an ASN data, a lot of different supply chain data that can have a big impact on success or failure. And so one of the things that we focus most on and that people often miss is that the lack of data may be more important than the data element that you're getting. An example of that would be, I have a purchase order associated to an ad event that's coming in for next Friday. I'm 7 days out from when I need to actually receive that product, but I'm 2 days late on receiving a routing request for that. So how do we share with the stakeholder that, hey, we need to be getting on the phone, or we need to contact the stakeholder for more information? And that's a part of that inbound visibility that can mean success or failure.
So what you're saying is that it's not enough to just have transportation level visibility. Companies need SKU level visibility?
Oh, absolutely. It's a lot of the visibility products that we see in the marketplace today really kind of focus on when a purchase order begins to move. And it's also focused on that purchase order. So we take a different approach because of our experience, because of what we've done from a vendor performance management perspective. We've always known that supply chain data is very important, and it always begins with the purchase order creation. When we see other companies out in the marketplace, they really don't start until until purchase order has been picked up. We want to know that that purchase order has been created. It's past a milestone beyond one standard deviation of some norm, so we can throw up an alert to prevent problems. We want to know that what items are in movement, not just necessarily a purchase order, because it might not be the whole PO that's related to an ad event, or it might be an item. So being able to group things together and have that visibility is very, very important to the folks that we're spending time with now. One more thing related to that. A lot of the visibility products out there are really focused in the transportation industry, and you really have to be a transportation expert to get any knowledge out of it. What we've built is we built something for a casual user. We term the casual user. It might be a marketing person or a buyer in an organization or a store person, and they don't have access to that transportation information from a TMS perspective or from information related to a WMS. So how do we take all these seemingly unrelated pieces of information, supply chain, valuable information, and put them in one place and make some meaning out of it for somebody that might not be an expert in one category or another?
Thanks for that, Greg. Great insight. Really appreciate it. So we're going to move over to Kip. Kip, as a former practitioner, what tools did you not have that would have been the most valuable to you and your colleagues to help mitigate these out of stocks?
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you for the question. I spent 18 years with Kohl's Department Stores, started out in the buying office for a number of years, did some training and development, and then moved over and spent my last decade in supply chain, really kind of acting as that liaison between the operations and logistics side of things with the product development, the buying teams, and really helping be that liaison between all those different entities. And I think to echo some of what Greg said, is giving everybody a one-stop shop, whether it's the merchants, the stores, distribution center, one tool to go and see that single version of the truth as product is moving through that supply chain, at an item level or at a total PO or program level. I think is just incredibly imperative. So some of the things I think would have been fantastic to have is just that little bit better visibility, not having to go to the old CICS green screens, not having to try and, contact transportation because they don't have access to a TMS system. They probably don't even know what the heck it is, much less have access to it. So providing them that capability of seeing that information in one spot, I think is just phenomenal and absolutely necessary. I think some of the other things is Greg talked about it again, as well as the at-risk. Some of the things I think I wish I had was not only for those brand launches or new store launches or even, major seasonal events, just my day-to-day stuff, right? You start talking to buying offices and individualized departments, every PO to them is important. So being able to proactively create alerts, look at product that is at risk. Greg mentioned the things that aren't moving yet. I think that's crazy important. I expected routing to be done prior to a start ship date. And if that routing didn't happen, I'm now running the risk of my product not getting there. So having ways to go back, react to that, and possibly, work more proactively with your supplier to say, hey, we might now have to prepay this or team truck it in order to save the sale and get it in on time. So I think all of those different aspects, having that visibility is incredibly crucial, and things that, I wish I had more easy access to back in my former life.
So Kip, from your past experiences, who in the organization would really benefit the most from having this real-time inbound visibility?
I'd say pretty much everybody. It's amazing kind of in the role that I'm at now, being an account manager, sales engineer with Traverse, working with a lot of different retailers. Just everybody in the organization, for the most part, needs it. I'm not sure HR does, but pretty much anybody from accounts payable doing three-way matching to anybody in operations, logistics, DCs, stores could even benefit from seeing when product is coming in. Maybe they've got an empty shelf and they want to know when that product is coming because they want to be able to tell that customer, hey, it's going to arrive on the truck, maybe tonight or tomorrow, and I can see that this thing is moving within the timeline. Having those different alerts, I think, are great for anybody in the merchant world, from senior level execs. If you've got a Black Friday advertisement and it's really important that that front page item is in stock and you want to make sure that that product's moving through, they probably have teams that are doing the research for them, but that information could come from a tool like our Vision and very quickly put it at their fingertips so that teams can let those senior leaders know, hey, everything is on track and all your product is going to arrive to drive these sales, minimize markdown liabilities on the back end, and just drive sales, drive margin, all those crazy important components.
Great, Kip. Thanks for that. So we've got a question. I've got a question for the group. This is for everybody that we have here on the panel. What do you see other retailers and companies doing to mitigate these out of stocks? Greg, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the question. Target and Walmart are known forever for their on-time and in full charges or chargebacks. It's compliance programs in the industry, but those were relaxed during the COVID-19 pandemic. But here's when I speak to people, I like to have laminated cards to reference and be able to pass them around. But here's one from October 4th of this year, 2022, from Bloomberg, and the title of it says, "Retailers, including Walmart, Target and Walmart get tough on suppliers with fines and late orders." And just three quick comments. First one is the very first paragraph. "Stores such as Walmart and Target have long fined suppliers that fail to deliver products on time in the right amount or with the correct specifications. But after the pandemic allowed for some leeway, U.S. retailers are now coming back with tougher standards and tightening expectations on goods that are received." And so that's one point. One other point that I want to, or two other points, is Target is beefing up their team in charge of policing orders, from the article. And one final point was from a study. It says McKinsey estimated 2018 that sanctions for faulty shipments could rise collectively to $5.5 billion a year in the United States. And so while there's been a lax of rules during the pandemic, these guys are firing on all cylinders, and they're really starting to focus on items that are not shipped or items that are shipped short.
Richard, how about you?
Well, as Greg said, I think the honeymoon or the grace period from the pandemic is over. Also, what we're seeing is space shelf agreements. And anyone who knows anything about retail knows that those are sacred in the business. Typically an annual agreement. Now the intervals are much more frequent in terms of the agreement. From a retailer's perspective, two key metrics, either sales per square foot or margin per square foot. If those targets aren't being hit, then the negotiations begin.
And Jay, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say most of my more progressive clients are investing in inbound visibility so they can actually have the tools to measure performance. Greg mentioned the increase in vendor chargeback. That's a very real thing, has a huge impact, but that only is a piece of it. It doesn't really resolve the out of stock challenge. And, so there's a lot of retailers who always talk about putting the customer first. But today, without technology, without a system like Traverse, companies really are going to be at a disadvantage And although they talk about improving customer experience, if they don't address the out of stock, this is only going to snowball and continue to get worse.
So let's talk a little bit about ROI, gentlemen. So Kip, let's start with you. What is ROI for an inbound visibility supply chain project? What does that look like?
I really think, Jason, that it boils back down to, getting the right product in the right place at the right time. And it gets even more important when it becomes, a promotional event or product or brand launches, as I kind of alluded to earlier. So, reducing missed sales, increasing margin by having that right product in the right place at the right time, right? That third part of that is at the right time. So it really is important to get that stuff in the stores and be available for sale, ultimately making that happy customer, right? And for every day it's not on your selling floor, it could be out on your competitor's selling floor, and you're starting to walk those folks, right? So it's more than just having the product at that one time. It's making that repeat customer, having them be loyal to you and coming back to your organization. So I think I've seen a recent Gartner article that talks about some organizations have been able to translate this into a reduction of lost sales or even an increase of sales by having that product in. And again, I think it's just back to keeping those loyal customers, getting them back in the door time and time again, and thinking of you first when they think of that experience.
Great. Greg, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, kind of to dovetail into what Kip said, I get an opportunity to speak to merchants fairly frequently, and while lost sales are very difficult to measure, out of stock is fairly difficult to measure. And quite honestly, on kind of a side note, I think retailers really didn't understand what their out of stock positions were until the pandemic happened, whenever they started buying online, when they introduced buying online, pick up in store. And when a customer comes through your door and wants to pick up an item and it's not there, they go away. We saw Richard slide 1 in 5, 1 in 5 persons that happens to. Well, when you have you're paying an hourly person to go pick somebody's order, that's the packing slip, and they're gonna and they need to, for a customer is going to come pick it up and they can't find it, they're getting managers involved. So suddenly now we know that we have a problem with in stock or out of stock positions. Well, in any case, it's very hard to measure. It's anecdotal, but when I do get a chance to talk to the merchant community, one of the things I point out is I like to tell them that they sell absolutely 0%. And Jay mentioned this earlier. They sell absolutely 0% of the things the vendor doesn't ship. And the things that the vendors ship late, that's back to the on time and in full, they probably do, they sell it at a reduced margin if they do sell it at all. And so visibility is a big part of understanding that, beginning to understand that part. But the ROI really comes in not only in that visibility, but when you can take that visibility and turn it into a vendor performance issue. Back to that same Bloomberg study, it said that in many cases, Walmart might be reducing invoices by up to 12% for those out of stock positions. And so if you couple that visibility with the missing, if you couple that with the short shipment or the no shipment and compare that and turn that into a chargeback and hold vendors accountable, then your ROI becomes measured in months. And quite honestly, it could be measured in days.
Jay, your perspective?
Yeah, so my experience is really working for a lot of growth or turnaround companies. And outside of small parcel and other transportation optimization plans, putting in a supply chain visibility tool always had the fastest ROI. I'm used to having 3 months from an ROI standpoint. And, quite frankly, it was an easy one. When I went to my peer, the CFO, and said, we need to invest money, it was an easy, very quick ROI for a couple of reasons. One is, in many companies that I worked for, we reduced our overall supply chain days by 25%, which had a huge impact on our in-stock, had a huge impact on sales, customer retention, okay, the valuation of the company itself. The other great thing from an ROI standpoint is you don't need to wait in line with the IT group, because the majority of the work is done by Traverse. So you don't need to go into a queue to try to get this done. My experience is really between 90 and 120 days, this is up and running, huge impact on the company, and really transformational in my experience.
Thanks, Jay. Richard, what are your thoughts on this?
Jason, just to add to what Jay and Greg said, number one is opportunity cost. During this recording, we're in the heat of season right now. Every day counts. So you have one out of stock day, you're never going to get that day back. That is particularly important to not only all retailers, but grocers especially, right? And that industry has been hit very hard with out of stocks. So that being said, for those in the audience today, maybe a little difficult going to your senior management team and saying, I'm going to reduce out of stocks. I'm sorry, I'm going to reduce out of stocks, but I'm also going to reduce opportunity costs. So with that, I believe we have a slide from McKinsey & Company, and they just did an excellent report on real-time supply chain visibility, and these were their key metrics. So for those of you in the audience, when you head down that long hallway to ask for that project, what they found was a 3 to 7% increase in sales, net margin improvement of 1.5 to 2.5%, and what a lot of CFOs like to see, a 15% improvement in working cash. So those two areas would be the two I would focus on.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks to all the panelists. We're running pretty short on time here, so we want to get to as many questions as we can. We had a number of questions come in from the audience. If we can't get to yours, we're not going to get to them all. The team at Traverse, Jay, if you have some questions for Jay, they'll reach out to you offline immediately after this webinar. But the first one we've got is from Kathy, and it's for Greg. Kathy wants to know, what are the minimum data requirements to get an inbound visibility project off the ground and running, Greg?
Thank you for that question, Kathy. I think the very minimum is purchase order. We start there because that's how this whole inbound process begins. So purchase order is the very, very minimum, but we need some supply chain data to go with that. In a perfect world, it would be TMS data. And you think about other data that goes beyond that, ASN and some transportation movement data and WMS, all the way through to the store. And that just touches on many of the many that have been identified. But I guess at the end of the day, the easiest way to say it would be purchase order, and TMS would be a great start. If you don't have TMS, that's okay. You don't have to. I do think, and this is probably a Richard question, I do think we're offering a special promotion related to an implementation or commitment to 30-day up and running related to PO and TMS, but that's really a Richard question.
Richard, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that promotion?
That's correct. We've got a quick start program where we take a minimal amount of files and we commit to a 30-day uptime. And just so the audience knows, it's predicated on providing actionable data, actionable, good, clean data from you all. And it takes us about 30 days to get you up and running.
And maybe post we can shoot these folks an email about that so they can get a little bit deeper dive into it, see if it's right for them.
Yep.
Fantastic. So that's good, Greg. I appreciate the response there. We're going to move to Jay. Chris has a question for you, Jay. When you were convincing your senior management team of the need for supply chain visibility, Jay, what did you focus on?
Great question, Chris. Yeah, it's two things: sales and customer service. In addition, the holistic change that it really happens for the entire company by putting in a supply chain visibility system like Traverse. The ability to measure proactively and really resolve issues up front, as opposed to trying to do something in arrears. We use the scorecard that the system kicks out, and that allowed us to use that cross-functionally, anywhere from the president to the head merchants to product development, accounts payable. Kip mentioned it before, but this is a system that really overlays everybody. And so it's a pretty easy thing to bring up and to use. Again, in my experience, it's really one of the top three things that I would always bring up, and that's going to be able to drive holistic changes for the company. The other thing I would always bring up is the litany of other companies that are using it, whether it's CVS, Petco, Burlington, Office Depot, Kohl's. These are names and companies that people understand and respect. But again, at the end of the day, This is a terrific way to drive improvement for your customer. So please let me know if you have any questions in addition to what you just posed.
Thanks, Jay. So we've got Xavier has a question, kind of a statement and question. He said, our situation's different. We have too much inventory at this point. How can inbound visibility help us? Kip, why don't you touch on that one?
Absolutely. I think similarly to just having good visibility to everything is going to allow you to do, different stuff. So first couple of things I think that come to mind here is, being able to see what items, whether it's at an item level, PO level, product, program, should be able to go back and key that into a good, visibility tool and see what's in the pipeline. Is there something that hasn't shipped yet that I can possibly negotiate and cancel orders? If it is in motion, can I work with the vendors or suppliers to negotiate some sort of return to vendor or some sort of a discount for the product that is, heavy in inventory? All the way to maybe redirecting that product. So do you look at, where am I going to minimize that markdown liability? Can I, take a look at some of my better selling stores? Maybe at this point, if everybody's overstocked, how do I get it to the stores that are going to do the best to chew through that overstock? So there's all sorts of analytical tools that should allow them to make those good decisions, but this gives them that initial visibility to where it is in the pipeline and allow them several freedoms to kind of redirect where that product goes, or, ultimately, if it's that overstocked, trying to identify orders that aren't in motion yet so that you can cancel and move on to the product that's next, the next best thing for sales.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kip. So we're going to take one more before we close it down and wrap. We're going to go back to you, Greg. This is from Shelby. It's pretty simple. How long does it take to implement the Traverse System solution?
Shelby, that's a good question. Thank you for that. We mentioned the 30-day from start to finish for a product that we call Vision. That is our supply chain visibility application. We have another vendor performance tool that goes a little bit in depth and does some of those things that we talked about with from a charge and compliance perspective with Target and Walmart. And stand up a system like that, it's a little bit more detailed, a lot more involved from a business perspective. And so that generally we'd like to say 90 to 120 days.
Great. That's all the questions we're going to take. Before we leave, just a few key takeaways for you folks. Jay, we're going to move to you. Thanks again for joining us. Your insight was invaluable. How can folks out there learn a little bit more about your offering? Can you tell them how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks everyone for having me. I enjoyed being part of the panel. As I looked at people who were online with us today, it also it was great to see some names that people I've worked with, people that it's been too long to catch up. So again, for me as a business advisor, I'd love to have conversations with both people that I've known before or new contacts. I'm on LinkedIn, and you'll have the information relative to LinkedIn, as well as my website, as well as the email that will be provided. So again, look forward to talking about inbound visibility, any other supply chain challenges you want to talk about, or just to catch up. So look forward to catching up with you in the near future.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks for participating again today. We really enjoyed it. Richard, you've got the last say. How can folks learn a little bit more about Traverse, the Vision solution, all that good stuff?
Thank you, Jason, and a very special thanks to Jay Kent taking the time out of his very busy day to participate with us on today's webinar. How you reach us, a couple of different ways. I've been told if you put your phone up there, you'll get a direct link to our website. If not there, our LinkedIn page. If not there, simply barry@traversesystems.com if you'd like to learn more. I'd also like to say that today's presentation, we kind of kept it at a high level. For January's presentation, we're going to dig into the application a little deeper. We're going to show some specific examples, some not only specific scenarios, but personas, who within the organization benefits the most from Vision, our real-time supply chain visibility solution. So on behalf of the panel, and again, the entire Traverse Systems team, we want to thank everyone in the audience for their participation. If you want to learn more, please reach out to me, and hope to see everyone back for January's presentation. In the meantime, happy holidays.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Just one final reminder, this is going to be on demand. We'll get this out in the next 24 hours. And what we're doing now, what the Traverse team is doing, is they're putting together highlight reels of every webinar that they do. It's really Clip Notes versions of these longer sessions. They're about 6 to 7 minutes. We'll have that out in the next week or so. You'll have access to that. Thanks again for joining us. Happy holidays. Look forward to seeing you in the new year.